We'll call the August meeting of the Lee County Board of Education to order. Dr. Newell is going to offer our invocation.
Let us pray. Lord, we ask that you be with us in our meeting and help us to be wise in the decisions we make for the good of all those who have placed their trust and confidence in our leadership. We also ask that you be with the Clay family during these difficult times. Amen.
Thank you very much. You have the consent of the agenda before you. We can adopt it by consent. All right. First item is a presentation concerning the REACH program. Dr. Miller.
Yes, sir. On July 1st, 2010, Brad Bryant became Georgia's 20th state school superintendent when appointed by Governor Sonny Perdue. As a parent with kids who attended public school and a wife who works in public education, former local and state board member, Brad is well qualified to be an educational leader. He served on the DeKalb County Board of Education for 12 years, serving as board chair for 7 of those years. He also served 7 years as the 4th District representative on the State Board of Education. He's past president of the Georgia School Board Association and also served as president of the National School Board Association Southern Region. Brad's an attorney, he's an elder in his church, and he's here to talk to us about REACH Georgia, where he serves as vice president.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I had to do all of that to be able to do something fun like REACH. So thank y'all for letting me come down tonight and spend a little bit of time with you and tell you about the program. And first thing I will say is when you open this up, let's start on the right-hand side, and you'll see that your county is colored in blue. And that is because up until the pandemic, Dr. Miller and our team were working on bringing this to you, and we got shut down probably February of 2020. So we mutually agreed to put it on pause. So I'm excited to be able to get back out on the road and talk to you a little bit about the scholarship program. Probably many of y'all have either had children, grandchildren that have benefited by the Hope Scholarship, and when I go around the country, there's not a better merit-based scholarship program in the world. I mean, we got that hands down. We ended up, and so I work out of Georgia Student Finance, which administers the Hope Scholarship and the other state scholarships. Last year, we crossed the $1 billion threshold in investing in students for that single year. We've, the state of Georgia served over 1.2 million students with the Hope Scholarship and over $10 billion in scholarships. When Governor Deal came into office and they recalibrated the Hope, they recognized that there was a gap in that we did not have any need-based funding. And so he spent the first year, or had his team spend the first year of his first term thinking and looking at what type of scholarship programs across the country that might work. And Florida has one of the best program called Take Stock in Children. And it does need-based a little bit different than just waiting until a student gets to be a senior, determining that there's a need and saying, here's money, go out and do your thing. What the research showed was that you needed to invest in these economically disadvantaged students whose families probably did not have a rich history with post-secondary education. You needed to invest in them much earlier than that junior or senior year of high school. So what REACH is about is starting with 8th graders, letting your middle school do its magic in helping transition those students into your 9th grade academy and into your high school, and then working that same magic over the course of their high school career so that when they finish, they walk across the Lee County stadium or the gymnasium and get their high school diploma. They're prepared academically to be able to do the work at a Hope-eligible Georgia secondary institution. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that just by virtue of the economic disadvantage nature of the family, for many of these families, the decision is made by the parent early that with the cost of college, there's no way that they can afford it. So when you enroll your REACH scholars, they are awarded a $10,000 scholarship that they can use at any Hope eligible institution in Georgia. and they can use that over 4 years. We're agnostic in the sense of we love Albany Tech just as much as we love Albany State. We need veterinarians just as much as we need vet techs. So what we know is for a workforce in Georgia, we're going to need folks that have something beyond high school, but not necessarily does it require a 4-year degree. And we don't want that to be a decision of government. We don't want that to be a decision of reach. We don't want that to be your decision. We want that student and that family to think about what's going to create a meaningful, purposeful life for their student. So the $10,000 scholarship, and many of our post-secondary institutions are adding additional dollars to that because the students are economically disadvantaged. They're going to fill out the FAFSA. They're going to be able to max out on the Pell Grant. And then roughly 80% of our students this past year and 75+% over the 5 classes that we've had graduate, the first 5 cohorts, have qualified for the Hope Scholarship. So these kids are just knocking it out of the top when they see a pathway to post-secondary. They're given the quality instruction that y'all provide daily and yearly to these students so that they finish with their Hope eligibility, they finish with Pell Grant, they have their REACH scholarship, they have some dollars depending on where they go to post-secondary, it's added to that. All of that comes together with a pretty nice financial package so that what was formerly seen as barriers financially becomes something that really works well for the student. And then the third piece of it is that, and y'all are blessed within the state, but particularly in the Southwest region, when we get over closer to the Alabama border, a lot of, when you look at the number of adults with a 2 or 4 year degree, it's 1 in 10. And that's gone up a little bit, but if you think about that, if a student wants to ask an adult in the community, tell me about your college experience, 9 out of 10 are going to be folks that can't give that to them. And those that do likely are teachers, educators, or law enforcement. And in many instances, that family has not had a healthy interaction with either of those. So what Florida did that we've adopted is each of the students that you would enroll would have a volunteer mentor that would just help guide them, much like y'all do with your athletics and others extracurricular activities, just to ensure that student, when they get to a critical decision-making point, has somebody that they can rely on. And my wife and I did 8 years worth of senior high youth group, and that's no knock against parents, but sometimes when those young people hit the teenage year, the last thing they want to hear is from a parent. They're much more likely to listen to another adult, and we want to put that the type of caring adult into their stratosphere. So that's $10,000. They can use it $2,500 a year. We currently have about between 500 and 600 students that have graduated. When I started, when I came to the program, we had 3 pilot school systems. Governor Deal asked me to scale it out, and right now we're sitting at 90% of our school districts in the state are involved. It was intentional, and I'll take ownership for this, is that when I looked at, what I did is broke the state up into the economic development regions and then looked where I believe the need was the greatest to begin with. And y'all do such a good job of serving your students to begin with that y'all can look at the other members of the Southwest Georgia RESA and know that there were some higher priorities. So some of this was intentional. I'm coming to you kind of the end. If you look, other than Webster County, if we get y'all signed up and we get Webster County signed up, we've got the entire Southwest quadrant of the state fully in fold. What I think that's going to do is, and part of my goal is to try to get a little bit of that foundation and philanthropic money out of Atlanta into parts of Georgia, and they always complain that nobody wants to work with them. outside of the metro Atlanta area. And I'm just calling BS on that, because that's not true. That's not been my experience, and particularly in the southwest corner, it's been great to work with y'all. There is the first year, so what we would be looking at for this fall would be that Dr. Miller would work with y'all's teachers and building leaders, and they would recommend students that they believe would be academically promising, and that's defined as we want them to be able to make A's or B's in high school coursework. And what we found is most counselors, most teachers, if you go into any middle school classroom, that teacher can point out the kids that they want to give an application to. The student has to fill out an application. The parent has to fill out their part of the application. We ask that they get a recommendation, the student get a recommendation from a teacher or someone in the building, because we want them to get comfortable with having to do the type of work that's going to be required to fill out applications for high school programs or for college. They have to get a community member to also get them to do that. So that could be a church member, it could be somebody they babysit for, somebody they cut grass for. We want them to feel like that they have to put a little bit of effort forward to be able to do that. Then what happens is Dr. Miller and their team go through those and they pull out, so each school district, and we try to make this fair so that, up until last week, I always said that Alvin Wilbanks, with 180,000 students in Gwinnett County, only got 8 REACH scholarships. And then tiny little Quitman County with 230 students got 5 scholarships. So what we did is we did not want our big districts to take all the wind out of this, take all of the slots. So y'all's county would be eligible for up to 5 scholars a year. The first year, and I put on both my state and local, I didn't want to send a mandate down, and yet I didn't want it to end up being something that was given for free, because when the money dries up at the state level, usually the program does. So the first year, all 5 of those $10,000 scholarships would be fully funded by the state. We already have that money in the bank because we had you colored in blue, so that money's sitting there waiting for y'all to draw down. What would happen would be, as you look to enroll 5 scholars, what Dr. Miller and his team would do would be to put together 8 to 10 students that would be interviewed by a panel of community members. So it could be an elected official, it could be a pastor, it could be a banker, someone that could sit and let this student tell their story, but I also ask them and pull out of them what are their hopes and aspirations. And then that panel selects the 5 students, and then we tend to try to do as elaborate a signing ceremony as a local system wants to do. Because what we want to do is, and what's great for our middle schools is if you pull the middle school kids in and they see that there's value given towards an academic path as an 8th grader, it's just as impactful, I would argue, as when y'all sign a lot of them, sign Division I athletes, you know. So we do that. The second year and beyond, there's a local participation that is required, and for Lee County, what would that would be, and if you look at the second, the second on the REACH map, the local donation in the second year is $4,000, and then the state matches that with $6,000. So for the bankers, for your banker chair, to me, it's one of the legal forms of leverage that's out there. And you don't have to enroll 5 scholars. We had a couple of systems this past year that said with COVID, we just want to hold a year. And I think with Dr. Miller, when we talked with him, with y'all having 2 middle schools, what we thought might be entirely appropriate would be to try to do 2 from each, so that what we would be working with you and your community on would be raising $16,000 to then fund $40,000 of the scholarships. we want to be respectful of two things. One, we don't want to supplant dollars that are coming in for other areas. So we work very carefully with superintendents around the state to make sure that we're identifying sources of funding that may not have previously been there. We've had a lot of luck right along the Alabama border with some of our solar farm companies. In fact, 4 of our poorest communities have 25 years worth of funding now just because they were able to build that into the deal. But the funding comes from all kinds of sources. We've had, this is a great way to get the faith-based community in. We've got churches that underwrite a scholarship. Retired teachers are another great resource. Some of our, in Bibb County, their superintendent who doesn't like to wear blue jeans, sold blue jeans passes, and I think they raised $12,000 just for teachers being able to wear blue jeans. So there, and then we work with foundations and other EMCs, others to try to help underwrite that. But we realize, so that's the first thing, wouldn't be supplanted. The second thing is that we don't want to be less than respectful of the work that goes into raising that, so that if y'all enroll a scholar, that scholar moves out of state and loses the scholarship, Dr. Miller gets a chance the next year to fund a scholar at no additional cost. If the student if the student moves within the state, because this is a state scholarship program, they take the scholarship with them. But then, if let's fast forward 5 years, if they enroll at a technical college, use 2 years worth of their scholarship to get a technical college diploma, and have only used $5,000 of the $10,000 scholarship, then your local share comes back to you so that it's in Dr. Miller's kitty to be used for future scholars. And really what we want to do is just honor the fact that our local communities are investing in this program. The legislators, there was an effort to just make this completely paid for by the state, and our legislators pushed back on that, and they said, we want there to be some skin in the game, and which is what we hoped when we built that into the program. I think, that's a lot of information, but I wanted to do that on the you can look at some of the numbers that just show what we've done. We've raised over $5 million for Georgia communities, and some of those communities, when you went into them, they would tell you, we don't think if we rub 2 nickels together, we get a dime. And they've been some of our most prolific fundraisers, because when they get into this and they see these kids begin to flourish, it just changes lives. On the left-hand side, I'll just very quickly say there are only 3 documents that have to be completed. The first one is the application, and that is one and done. Once Dr. Miller signs that one, it's done. The second one is our participation agreement, and we realize that we don't want to fill everyone's inbox with paper. So it has a term that expires on June 30th of 2027. There is an exit provision. I ran this before most of the school board attorneys before I ever put it out there, because I've sat where y'all have and had a board member say, has our board attorney looked at this? And I didn't want to go into 180 different places and hear that. So this has been looked at by board attorneys. And then what we'll do is in 2027, we would ask all systems to renew that document for another 5 years, so that they don't have to worry about that. And then the last document is what I'll refer to as our pre-order form, to let our legislature know what they need to appropriate. And what we do is once a year, and we're in that period right now, our local systems will let us know what they believe their appetite for the upcoming year is, and those are all the documents that need to be signed. We've got a pretty robust website that allows the individual that Dr. Miller would ask to look at this program or look over the program. What I've seen is, and our foundations don't believe this could have happened, is we tried to create something that did not put the burden on the local superintendent to have to find someone to manage this on a full-time basis, because we know how tight budgets can be. And what we found is that this is very much aligned with the work that goes on day in and day out in the school system, and we leave it up to the superintendent to determine who is the best individual within the district to take care of the program. And I think you could call any of the superintendents and they would tell you that it's more a labor of love than an actual labor. And we've got some of our program coordinators, which is the term we use, that have retired, who have said, even though I'm retiring, I'm going to keep working this job voluntarily because it's one of the best things that I've been involved with. And one of them is in Decatur County. So any questions y'all might have, and I'm more than happy to answer questions. You got the cell number and my email. Happy to answer any questions you got now or later. But it's been great to work with
questions of
Dr. Miller.
No, it sounds like an outstanding.
Absolutely. Is that $4,000 a year per student?
No, so good question. Usually it's our superintendents that trip up on that. I'll have a superintendent do a call up in the middle of the year and go, Brad, when I signed up on this, I didn't think I can't, if I've got 25 students, so if I did 5 every year, I can't raise that kind of money. Once that $10,000 is funded, it's in the bank and it sits there until the student draws it down. So so every cohort that you do, consider them to be locked and loaded and moved to the side, and we intentionally did that because we didn't want to be betting on the future and have parents and students relying on that and then have a downturn in the economy, and then we also didn't want to feel like school systems had to be bound by a specific number. So a great example is McDuffie County thought they were going to have to roll back because they had a Georgia Pacific plant that burned. And what was really cool about that was that the Baptist church and the Methodist church each came forward and sponsored one of the kids. And so they didn't have to break stride whatsoever.
Thank you very much.
Well, good. Well, let us know what we need to do, and thank y'all for letting me come down with you.
Thank you for being here. All right. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from July 12th and July 26th meeting. What is the pleasure of the board? I have a motion from Ms. Lang and a second from Ms. Ford. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. We have the financial statement from June of this year. What is the pleasure of the board as it relates to the financial statement? Motion from Ms. Lang. Is there a second? Second from Dr. Newell. Any questions?
Gary, I had a question about the after-school program. I know that we're going to all 4 campuses. Do they have specific equipment that they let those children use, or do they use the equipment that's existing at the schools?
Pretty sure they use the existing at the schools.
Do you help replace that with the money from the after-school program?
If the principals ask me to, yes. I don't go out and just buy stuff from the bank.
I'm sure they will ask you. I just, I noticed that there was a surplus in that account, and a lot of kids using equipment, it has a tendency to wear out. So,
Right, I agree.
I just thought maybe we could use some of those funds to support that, and maybe even some of the playground equipment if it gets torn up. We had the after-school program on this campus years ago, and things happened, and we needed them to be replaced. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. Dr. Miller, the consent agenda.
We have a brief consent agenda today. There's 16 recommendations for employment, 6 resignations, 2 terminations, 4 reassignments, 1 correction to a previous agenda, and 2 out-of-state or overnight trips, and 2 fundraisers.
What is the pleasure of the board as it relates to the consent agenda? Have a motion from Ms. Lang, is there a second? Second from Ms. Ford, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. Dr. Miller, your report.
Yes, sir. I first would like to say thank you to our teachers and staff and students for a great first day of school. Things went very well, very pleased, but I could tell you about it, but I'd rather show you. So we have a brief video that was posted on Instagram, and if you've not seen it, I think you'll enjoy it.
And hopefully the sound will work.
Yeah, hopefully
One of these times we will learn.
Yolanda Robinson made this video, and it is, the part of it is from the convocation, but the majority of it is the first day of school. And what I saw going around to the campus and other folks who work here at Central Office that were on all the campuses that day was a lot of excitement from the students and the staff of the a lot of excitement all over, so we're very proud of that. Before we move into the reports, I do want to give the board an update. We're monitoring the community data for COVID cases. Obviously, we're in a surge right now, and we had some students and staff who tested positive over the weekend, even after the first day of school, resulting in some quarantine. You've probably heard or read in the media that the Department of Public Health released new guidelines for schools, basically leaving it up to the schools what to do with quarantine. Their recommendation is still what has been in place from the beginning, but they do allow schools the freedom to change and do or follow a different path. And we are continuing with our protocols as we currently have them. We deem that to be the best path forward in this situation. Quarantine is difficult on families, we realize that, but the priority is our safety of our students and staff. And so we'll certainly revisit those guidelines. They were released at 1 o'clock Friday afternoon, so we had already well into our first day of school by that point. So if you do hear about that, we are taking that under consideration. We'll revisit. Any questions about any of that? Okay.
Anything I'll say about that is let's just make sure it's consistent, whatever we.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Very well communicated.
I think our principals do a great job. They put a lot of time into it. And it is very time consuming, but they try to be consistent and keep people safe.
And also communicating how the students will be making, because I think that's a big concern.
Sure,
Parents.
certainly, yes, ma'am. And, you know, obviously, we want to keep our kids safe, but we also want to keep them on track with their academic progress. So, I can assure you that these leaders out here are very concerned about that. SPLOST, monthly reports, our SPLOST collections for July came in at $407,615.96. It's the highest total for July collections since we started doing SPLOST. Today, we are averaging about $100,000 more a month in collections than we were just 5 years ago. That's really good news. Also, I'd like to make a comment. This isn't sort of related to SPLOST, but Lee County recently sent out property reevaluation notices in the community. And one question I've been asked is if there are plans to raise property tax for education or maintenance and operations based on that reevaluation. The answer to that question is there are no plans. The reevaluation created an overall 19% increase in property values for Lee County. By law, the Board of Education cannot have a windfall. So once the property appeal process is complete, the board will then look at rolling back the millage rate potentially by 19% or whatever that figure comes out to be. So property owners will not see an increase in the millage rate. We are not proposing that. Obviously, the board has to take action, but if there was an increase, the board would have to hold 3 hearings like any millage rate increase. And Gary, I asked to say just a word or two about this, just in particular about if your property value changed.
If your property value went up because the county is 19%, then we should have to roll back, because that's, the total increase was 19%. Individually, you may have had a 20 or 30% increase in your property value. You'll see an increase in taxes even with a rollback, but if you saw less than 19%, theoretically, you should see a reduction in your taxes. From the school board. I don't know what the county will do.
Right. I think they're rolling back too.
That was in technology, we have 2 very good updates to share with the board. We have doubled internet bandwidth for schools. That's wonderful. We're already making good use of that, so that's a real blessing for our students and staff. Also, each school now has an external access point for Wi-Fi connectivity. With the pandemic in spring of 2020, many people were left without Wi-Fi, so they had to go to places like restaurants or the local library to gain access because of where they lived or didn't have access. So now they should be able to go to a parking lot at each school. I was talking with the director of technology today, and he actually was telling me that one of the staff members at Lee Elementary had their iPad in their car and it auto-connected. And so he was able to see that. It just picked up on that access point. So that is a really nice thing for our schools and communities.
Especially Lee County Elementary.
Yes. He actually called the teacher and said, "Is your iPad in your car?" Because he could see it, and so that was exciting. Under transportation, the first 2 days of school, we start buses about 30 minutes early to go home, to provide a little extra time as drivers run their routes for the first time, and we settle into the important work of getting students home safely. That went well Friday and today. Our leaders stay at their schools until there's an all clear that goes out from central office to make sure we got everybody home safely, and that came off great on Friday and again today. So we're settling into the routes. I will say that the bus paving project is moving right along. Some critical plumbing work is completed, and we're stockpiling materials in preparation for paving. But we had a meeting last week, and it looks like the project's going to be delayed until October finish before the buses can start parking. And that has to do with a shortage of drivers to transport the materials for paving to the construction site. And it's really beyond the control of the contractors or the system. It's something that a lot of people are dealing with right now. So we got that update last week. Finally, under plant operations, we have a PowerPoint prepared by Mr. Rash, and you can see they have completed numerous projects. Our custodial grounds maintenance, they've been very busy getting everything ready for school to begin. And you can see a picture of the new reception area in the front office at Kinchafuni. So we've gone back and addressed, for safety reasons, the vestibule at each school so that we can limit access and protect our folks working in that office. And that's a good picture of that.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I was over at Lee County Primary, and I noticed that Franklin said they had kind of spot cleaned, pressure washed some of the areas in the school system. But her roof's terrible. I mean, is that one of the spots you're gonna go in and pressure wash? It just has a lot of mold or black something.
They did parts of it, he said. They did parts of the second grade yet, but they have not done it all.
I mean, I know we're supposed to go in and redo that school in a couple of years, but in the meantime, you know, it looks kind of rough the way
Part of the remodeling will include.
yeah, I know.
So that'll be addressed, and we'll address as we can the other areas.
Does it look better than it did?
On that far end it does. There's just different areas that they didn't get to all of it, I guess. But some of the big areas are much better on the end where they were really bad.
The second grade end was pretty dark. It was, I got that.
Right there by the road.
Yeah.
Middle school east, that north side gets to look a little bit bad too sometimes. There's just a lot of black mold or something black over there.
I don't think it's mold. I don't believe it's mold, but it's deterioration for sure. You know, the Lee Primary roof, that building opened in '86, I think, so it's got over 30 years. And obviously that's that's the first priority project for this new SPLOST that's upcoming. And we actually Kelly today and I were talking about that we'll bring before the board, we need to make application with the state of Georgia because we've earned funding to remodel that school. So we have to make application prior to the next legislative session. So we're gonna speak to the board about that in our September meeting.
Any other questions about the bill? I will say I spoke to Chairman Mathis earlier today with the county commission. I think there's about 40 or 45 appeals they gotta work through before they know the final number for the digest, but still looking, similar to what the school system's gonna do for the county. But they'll know after they get those final numbers. All right. Moving on to discussion and action items, you have a request for the approval of the financial statement. Dr. Miller?
The financial statements for FY '22, the first two pages are the balance sheet and financials. The third page is the summary or is labeled Statement of Actual Financial Operations. And this is the page that requires the board members' signatures and submittal to the State Department of Education.
Now, that says 22, but that's the year end, June 30th, 21.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, where did I put
On the-
22?
just on the
Oh, I did
agenda
not know.
item, it's-
Oh, okay.
It's just our statement certification that that's what happened in 2021.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Yeah. All right. So we need approval of that financial statement that we will all sign off on at the end of this meeting. So what is the pleasure of the board? Have a motion from Ms. Lang, is there a second? Second from Mr. McDowell. All of us who look good in orange, say aye. No, I'm just kidding. All those in favor, let it know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. Second is request for approval of the non-resident tuition for this coming school year. Dr. Miller?
You have a copy of Gary's memo regarding the calculated local cost to educate a child. The children of employees who reside outside of Lee County are allowed to attend school in Lee County through paying tuition. This offsets our local costs for these students. It's my recommendation to set the rate at $9.50 per day or $1,710 per year.
Per the superintendent's recommendation, what is the pleasure of the board? Motion from Ms. Ford, is there a second? Second from Ms. Lang, is there any discussion? Hearing none. I'm sorry. Hearing none, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. Next item is a recommendation for approval of the amended bus driver recommendation list on a new scale. Dr. Miller?
I recommend the board approve the driver recommendation list for the new pay scale, and I thank Mr. McDowell and Ms. Ford for their working with our budget committee here in the system to help us bring this forward, and we hope there'll be other updates coming in the new year.
What is the pleasure of the board? Have a motion from Ms. Lang, is there a second? Second from Mr. McDowell. Is there any discussion or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. Last item on the agenda is an executive session. Ms. Lang?
I move that we go into executive session to discuss or deliberate upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action or dismissal, or periodic evaluation or rating of a public office or employee, or to interview applicants for the position of superintendent.
Is there a second? Second from Dr. Newell. All those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Jennifer, you know.
I'll be a fly.